Good morning. Welcome to First Unitarian Society of Madison. My name is Becky Burns. My pronouns are she or they, and I'm a member of our worship associate team here at FUS. That's a team of lay FUS members that assist during our services. And today I'm joined by the Reverend Kelly Asprooth-Jackson and the worship team of Linda Warren, Drew Collins, Daniel Carnes, Stephen Gregorius, and the members of our society choir. A special thanks to those volunteering today in many roles as greeters and ushers, hospitality providers, lay ministers, and sound technicians. At First Unitarian Society, we question boldly, listen humbly, grow spiritually, act courageously, and love unapologetically. If you are visiting us today, welcome. We're so glad you are able to join us. If you would like more information about First Unitarian Society, please stop by the welcome table located in the Commons. We hope that you'll be able to stay and join us for a coffee hour immediately following the service, also in the Commons. And for those of you connecting with us today virtually, we are glad you are with us too. And we hope you'll take a moment following the service to watch the announcements about various activities and programs upcoming here at the church. A few announcements. So many thanks to those who made this year's Autumn Fest a huge success. Thank you to all our volunteers who helped ahead of time and those who helped yesterday, tending to the fire and making cider and working the auction. If you would like a chance to bid on an auction item, there are a few items left that will be available in the Commons that you can bid on today. And thank you to everyone who attended. The turnout was wonderful and very good to see, both new and familiar and new faces. Now let's talk about those raffle items. So those can be found in the loggia. So if you bid on a raffle item, adults, your ticket is taped onto the item of the winners. So be sure to head over to the loggia if you did participate in the raffle. And a special thanks to our Director of Stewardship, Cheryl Melentine, for all that she does to make this such a roaring success. And today, our preschool RE class is completing their unit on teddy bears. And they're going to have a picnic and a parade during our coffee hour. And let me remind you, here at FUS, we applaud enthusiastically. Today at 12:30, we invite you all to join the Fall Forum, where we'll have opportunities to just have conversations. No voting today, but wonderful conversations amongst members. This coming Friday, November 1st, our Criminal Justice Reform Ministry team is hosting a viewing of the documentary Poverty and Power. There'll be a dessert at 6:30, followed by a 75-minute film at 7, and a discussion that will follow. More details, including a link to let us know that you plan to be there, can be found in the red floors. The weekend of November 2nd and 3rd will be our annual Honoring All Souls. So during these services, we honor all of the FUS members who have died in the previous year. If you have loved ones who have passed this year that you would like to remember during our service, please email Reverend Kelly Crocker with their names. And now I invite you to join me in a moment of silence to center ourselves and bring ourselves fully into this time and place as we join together once again in community. Bring who you are as you enter our church this day. Bring your best selves, your struggling selves. Bring your mistakes and your triumphs. Bring your shortcomings and your recommitment to good.
We cast not our eyes below. We say to ourselves, we are how we came, wounded from struggles, triumphant in our survival, entitled by birthright, to belong to this, the only humankind there is, saying, I am included, I belong, I am here, and I will be and do.
Bring yourself here and open your heart to beauty, to truth, to the door that is open to the presence of God. Here in this church, we are trying to walk together on this peaceable way, trying to hammer out division and hatred and all that separates one from another.
We say, I will breathe joy into desolation. I will breathe peace into conflict. I will breathe life into destruction. I will be the earth I wish to see. I am growth and hope and glee.
We try, and we will fall short, but held in love, we will try again. We come together this hour as a church to bow our heads in prayer, to raise our voice in song, to remember our promises and vow to live by them once again.
And now I invite you to rise in all the ways that we do and join me in the words of aspiration for the kindling of our chalice flame. The flame of our chalice is quiet, but not quite silent. In a still room, up close enough, some ears might hear it burn. The stirrings of conscience are quiet, but not quite silent. With patience and effort, caring hearts can feel their pull. Whether or not we hear this flame, may our hearts be moved to compassionate action. And now I invite you to turn to those around you and greet each other with signs of love and peace.
Now let's remain standing and sing together our opening hymn, number 113, Where is Our Holy Church?
Thank you.
All right, well, I would now like to invite forward anybody who would like to join me up here for a story this morning. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for being here. Oh, you have a bunny. Very nice. You know what? I have a story that is about a bunny today, so that works out really nicely. So, this story I have actually told here once before. So it's possible that if you have been paying careful attention and you've been here a little while, you might actually remember it. I'm going to tell it in a little bit of a different way, because there's always different ways to tell stories if you're willing to use your imagination about it. Cleo, yeah. More than 9 years ago? Well, more than 9 years ago, I wasn't here to do that, so no. So, here's the background you need for this story. This story comes from the Buddhist tradition. The Buddhist religion we call Buddhism because it was founded by a person whose title is the Buddha. He's a real person. His name was Siddhartha Gautama. And he's a real person. I cannot promise you that every single story that he told is necessarily, literally true. I wasn't there for them. But this is a story that he did tell. And the thing you need to know about the Buddhist religion is that one of the beliefs in Buddhism is about what's called reincarnation. It's a big fancy word for the idea that we are born, we live a life, we die, and then we get born again into a different life. And so every human being, every being rather, gets to live many different cycles of life. And in some of those cycles, they might be human beings, but in others, they might be other types of animals. So this is one of the stories the Buddha told about another life where he was an animal and not a human being. So, here is the story. Once upon a time, there was a hare, like a bunny rabbit, basically, right? Just like that. Like the picture, exactly. Got nice big ears. If you were here for Autumn Fest yesterday, maybe you got to meet some of the bunny rabbits. Yes. Oh, do they live in a place that has... Well, rabbits are very adaptable. They live a lot of different places. This particular rabbit lived in a jungle. And it lived in the jungle. It was very naturally nervous. It was very anxious. It worried a lot. Does anybody else worry about a lot of things? You get concerned about things that haven't happened yet, might never happen. You still worry about them. Thank you for your courage and your willingness to join me in admitting to that trait. Yes, so this hare, this rabbit, this bunny, worried a lot. And it was asleep one day under a big, tall mango tree. It was sleeping away, having some very worry-filled dreams, and when it heard a crashing noise, a loud crashing noise, woke it right up, sat up with a jar, and it immediately thought to itself, oh my goodness, right? So it's a worrier. So instead of maybe being a little bit more careful about what it assumed based on the crashing noise it heard, it went straight to the worst possible scenario. It said, the whole world is falling apart. That's what that crashing noise must be about. I need to get away from this place as fast as possible. So it started running away as far and as fast as it could. And it ran past some more rabbits, and the rabbits all perked up. Their ears went up like that, and they said, hey, where are you running from? And it didn't stop, but it sort of shouted over its shoulder, I'm running away from where the world is falling apart. And so the other rabbits were concerned too, so they followed after the hare. They kept running along, and they passed another group of animals. What kind of animals do you think they passed? I'll come back to you. We're going to go with cows. Okay, so they passed a bunch of cows, and the cows were all just hanging out in the field, being pretty cool, but they saw the rabbits running by, and they said, hey, rabbits, what are you running from? They said, well, the whole world is falling apart. We're trying to get away from that, right? So the cows started following after the rabbits, and they passed another group of animals. Any idea? They passed some axolotls. They were chilling out in the riverbank. Clearly, this jungle must have been in South America because axolotls are only native to a very small region of South America. But there they were, hanging out in the riverbank. The cows come stampeding by, and they say, hey, cows, what are you running away from? And the cows said, the whole world is falling apart. We're trying to get to safety. And so the axolotls, on their little squishy feet, are pawing along behind them. Maybe they rode on the cows. That would be a good strategy, yes. If you needed to transport axolotls that way, it would be effective. Yeah. Any thought? Zorses. Okay, so then they ran past a whole group of zorses. A zorse is a horse-zebra hybrid. And the zorses saw the axolotls riding on the back of the cows, and they said, what's going on? They said, we're trying to get away from where the world is falling apart. And so they ran along too. And they all ran so far and so fast that they got out of the jungle and almost to the edge of the sea, like they were going to run into the ocean. Oh. We'll save that one for another day, because the actual next animal that they saw is planned in the story. It is actually a lion, just one lion, who came up to the front of where the animals were headed, got in between them and the ocean, and roared really loudly, like that, and got all their attention, got them to stop for a second and said, hey, what's going on? What's the big idea? Where are you all going so fast? And the zorses said, well, don't look at us. You got to ask the axolotls. And the axolotls said, look, it wasn't our idea. We were just following the cows. And the cows said, look, all we're doing is going where the rabbits told us to go. And the rabbit said it was that one hare. And the hare said, look, I know that the world is falling apart. I'm trying to get away, trying to get to safety. The lion said, well, how do you know the world is falling apart? And the hare said, well, I heard this big crashing noise. And the lion said, well, how about you show me where you heard this crashing noise? And so they all went all the way back into the jungle, all the way back to the mango tree, and the hare said, it was here, I heard this crashing noise. And the lion looked around and pointed out that there was a mango that was on a branch that had snapped, right? Like maybe it fell out of the tree and it broke the branch, and that must have been the crashing noise that the hare heard. So, in the traditional ending of this story, right, the Buddha tells this whole story and says at the end, and in that time, I was the lion. Now, the lion's a pretty cool character to be in that story. Gets to kind of step in and show the hare what their mistake was. Pretty gently, I might add. It's a pretty polite way to not just say, oh, you silly hare, what nonsense. Like, walked him through it, took him seriously, helped explain to him the situation, right? Now, sometimes maybe in the days that I'm proudest of, happiest with myself, maybe I'm the lion, okay. But a lot of days I'm the hare. Or sometimes I'm one of the cows, right? Or one of the zorses or the axolotls. One of the people who's maybe not the first person to have the worry, but goes along with the worry, like joins someone else in their anxiety. Most of us have that potential to worry about things, even if they haven't happened yet, even if they might never happen. So this story is not just about the heroic energy of not joining in the anxiety. It's also about the fact that that's something that's true about most of us, and having compassion for ourselves and others about that. Yes, Cleo? I'm in the truth. Okay. Thank you so much for listening to my story. We're going to sing it to your classes now.
So I'm going to take an extended moment this morning and share a little bit about myself. I was raised here at FUS. I came through the coming of age when Max Gabler was our minister. And then I went and served in many roles. I taught RE classes. I attended adult education classes. I participated in the Quest program. But I didn't really feel like I had found my place at FUS. So I co-facilitated Journey Circles and the Racial Justice Ministry team. I ushered, I provided hospitality, and I even tried joining the choir. My family has had FUS involved in 4 different weddings, 2 memorial services, and I still hadn't found my place here at FUS. Now I serve as a worship associate. I'm a member of our Healthy Congregations team, the welcoming team, and the nominations committee. I volunteer as a facilitator in this year's Pathways program, and yesterday you may have found me as your live auctioneer at the Autumn Fest. Next month, you'll see me at Art at the Right Place selling baked goods, which reminds me, we need you to bake some goods. Little PSA, on November 22nd, 1122, remember that date, drop off your baked goods so we have something to sell. So now I feel like I've found my place here at FUS. Now I share this not to say that you have to try everything in order to find your place here. After all, I've never been a lay minister yet. I share this to assure you that if you haven't felt fully incorporated into the fabric of FUS, you still have time. After it all, it took me 50 years. Now, being a worship associate means the world to me. I feel so very blessed to have Team Kelly leading my spiritual growth, and I enjoy supporting them in this small way. I also want our congregation to be a place that welcomes non-clergy voices in the service, which holds up a key aspect of Unitarian Universalism belief that ministry of the congregation does not belong exclusively to ordained clergy, but to everyone. And finally, I enjoy looking out from this treasured perspective because collectively, we are all a beautiful bunch, and that brings me great joy.
Thank you, Becky. The town of Fudai sits on the northwestern coast of the main Japanese island of Honshu. Its economy is largely based on fishing. It depends very thoroughly on the sea. Fudai has less than 3,000 people in it. But what is noteworthy about it is not its size, but its infrastructure. It has a very large floodgate system, dramatically larger than any of its neighbors do. It has that floodgate because of Kotaku Wamura, who served as mayor of Fudai for 40 years and spent most of that time fighting to have the structure built and eventually overseeing its construction. The project took 12 years to complete, and Wamura retired just a few years after it was finished. It wasn't hard building support for a system to prevent flooding. Tsunamis, major tidal waves, are a very well-known danger in Japan. But the scale of the project seemed out of all proportion. The cost was over 3.5 billion yen. Now, I know that everything sounds more impressive when you put it into yen, but that is still well over 22 million modern dollars. A tremendous expense for a theoretical problem for a town with only a couple of thousand people in it. Yet, Kotaku Wamura persisted. And then, in 2011, the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami struck Fudai and its region, one of the worst natural disasters in modern Japanese history. There was terrible destruction. Entire villages on the coast were lost. But Fudai was so thoroughly prepared for a crisis of this magnitude one that almost no one had imagined as a realistic possibility, that none of its houses were destroyed. The town barely even got wet. The former mayor had not lived to see his foresight pay off like that, but a delegation from the village went to visit the place where he is buried in order to offer their thanks to him. Now, it is in the nature of human beings to treat the course of their lives as fixed and stable. It is also in the nature of human lives, lived on a long enough time scale, to eventually encounter some sort of massive disruption to that stability, sometimes under disastrous circumstances. Catastrophic disruptions to life and well-being for cities or nations or the entire world are a fixture of religion and folklore the whole world over. The flood of Noah and the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah and the other cities of the plain are familiar stories from the Hebrew Bible, as is the end of days narrative from the book of Revelation in the Christian scriptures. But there are many others. One such comes from the entwined traditions of ancient Greece and Rome. The gods, either Zeus or Jupiter, depending on if you favor the Greek or the Roman name, and Hermes or Mercury, came in disguise to a certain particular town. There they went from house to house, asking for a place to sleep for the night. Again and again, they were turned away by all of that place's residents, even those with ample space, empty rooms, empty beds, more food than they knew what to do with. That was until they came to the home of Bacchus and Philemon. That couple had lived the entirety of their long lives in that town, but they had been kept on the margins of it due to their poverty and perhaps a sense that they did not fit in with the rest of the population. For where all of their neighbors had scorned the visitors and turned them away, Bacchus and Philemon welcomed the two disguised divinities. Now, they had little to offer, but they made a feast out of it nonetheless, bringing out every last bit of food in their pantry, refilling their guests' cups over and over again. Feeling that they ought to offer the visitors a more substantial meal, the couple made to catch the goose that toddled about the plot of land next door to their little hut. You have to picture, to really appreciate this story, you have to picture them, these two older people, a little stooped with age, running around after that goose, trying desperately to catch it, failing rather badly. It eventually took refuge in Zeus's lap. And Zeus revealed himself to be not a stranger and a traveler, but a god, and asked for his hosts to show mercy on the goose. Instead of sharing a meal of roast goose, Zeus and Hermes took the couple up onto a mountain overlooking the town. And there they saw, as the sea rolled in and swept the village away, the only house that was left was that belonged to Bacchus and Philemon. The house became a temple. The two residents became priests presiding over its altar, until one day when they came to die, they were transformed into two entwined trees growing on that same spot. As I said, this story appears in the mythological accounts of both ancient Greece and ancient Rome. It was a particular favorite of the great Roman poet Ovid. And so it seems likely that it would have been well known to many of the residents of the cities of Herculaneum and Pompeii on the western coast of Italy when, just a few generations after Ovid wrote, their own city was so utterly and suddenly destroyed. That event, the eruption of the volcano Mount Vesuvius in the year 79 of the Common Era, is notorious for how thoroughly off guard it seems to have caught the settlements that were engulfed in it. They had very little warning and almost no context with which to appreciate what was happening. Almost 2,000 years later, the loss of life remains tragic and staggering. And at the same time, those two settlements, which were almost frozen in ash, are today some of our best windows into the life and the world of that place and that time. The library at Herculaneum is proving particularly and uniquely valuable. Its many scrolls were totally carbonized in the disaster, but intrepid archaeologists are now using new imaging techniques to digitally unroll them, one incredibly thin layer at a time. Hopefully, this may produce new texts of entire books previously thought to be lost to history. Perhaps, even, some heretofore unknown work by Ovid himself. We are naturally inclined to imagine our world as fixed and stable, or at least to want it to be, to take refuge in the idea that the fundamental conditions that we depend upon for living cannot and will not change. Facing the possibility of potentially catastrophic change is hard and scary. But I am not raising the specter of such to frighten you in some misplaced, seasonally themed attempt at spookiness. I am doing so because there are things to learn from the reality of sudden dramatic crises that have befallen other places and whole societies in the past. And because we can never plan for or prepare for a catastrophe that we cannot acknowledge to ourselves as being possible. And then also, because there is this simple reality, that our history as a nation and as a religious movement is inextricably bound up with another society's catastrophe. When the first English colonists came to the coast of what is today Massachusetts, their arrival portended centuries of upheaval and destruction for the Wampanoag, the native people of that place. But that wasn't even the beginning of it, because before the coming of the Mayflower, disease imported from Europe had already swept through the region, decimating the local population, and in many cases, erasing entire communities. The colonial settlement that became so central to the eventual emergence of the United States, which will be commemorated this coming month in the annual observance of Thanksgiving. In that region, that community, so central to the emergence of the United States, was in this way built on the aftermath of an apocalypse, which makes the native communities who have endured and continue to endure in that region, here in Wisconsin, and all across this continent, all the more incredible for their tenacity and their strength. But as I said, this isn't just about national history. It is also about our own particular history as Unitarian Universalists. We are one branch, or rather, we're two branches grown together, of the free church tradition. And that tree traces back to those early English-speaking Puritan settlers in New England, who formed new religious congregations to be the heart of each new town they founded. Just a little more than a generation after landing there, those folks authored a crucial document called the Cambridge Platform. That's a statement that was issued by the early Puritan churches outlining what they were about and how they were going to relate to each other. Even though they would not recognize us, most of our varied beliefs about God and the Bible would have been grounds for a heresy trial 300 years ago. We are still descended from those early Puritans. Our faith has changed dramatically. But the way we organize ourselves is very much the same. We aren't bound by it anymore, but we were and are still shaped by it. Which is why the Cambridge Platform lives as this sort of seminary buzzword. It is the right answer to a lot of odd questions. You have to read it at least once. And other than that, people do not bring it up very often in conversation. Now, if you read that document, you may come across this paragraph, as I once did, which I will give you now. A congregational church is, by the institution of Christ, a part of the militant visible church, consisting of a company of saints by calling, united into one body by a holy covenant, for the public worship of God and the mutual edification of one another in the fellowship of the Lord Jesus. Okay, let me break that down for you a little bit. Our faith is shaped by several sources, and one of these is Christianity. Much of who we are today, in terms of our values, our ideas, and our practices, we owe to the Christian tradition. And many of us continue to identify as Christians. And yet also, many of us do not. And while there is no single doctrine of Jesus agreed upon among us, we tend to view him collectively in fairly human terms. When I speak of Jesus, it is as a teacher and someone in the tradition of the Hebrew prophets, not a God or other supremely important spiritual being. A variety of beliefs are welcome at our table, from the confident atheist to the equally certain lover of God. But the doctrines of Christian orthodoxy, that Jesus is the one true Son of God who died for the sins of humankind, this is no longer our consensus. The point is that if the Cambridge Platform were written today by and for Unitarian Universalist congregations, it would not be full of phrases like the institution of Christ or the fellowship of the Lord Jesus. But that is not the phrase in that paragraph that struck me. It wasn't even the idea that we are to be part of a militant church. It was the idea that any congregation held together by this document, including our own, must be a company of saints by calling. Company of saints. Company of saints? Do you know that feeling when you are making a recipe and you just put in the cinnamon and the baking powder and you're mixing it all together and you realize that you switched which one got a half teaspoon and which one got a whole tablespoon? It's a little bit like that. For a second, it made me ask myself, am I on the wrong line of work? Being a Unitarian Universalist isn't supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be challenging, to demand that we confront our own prejudices and assumptions and live a life that is boldly true to the love that connects us, and the truth as we understand it. But at the first reading, saint seemed like an awfully different standard. Aren't saints venerated for their patience and tranquility? When saints are alone in the car and hear someone from the opposing political party on the radio, they don't yell back at them, do they? Oughtn't a saint to answer all of their emails quickly and courteously, or at least not worry if they can't? Shouldn't a saint be able to have a spirited debate with his 5-year-old child about getting dressed for school and come out looking like the more reasonable and mature of the two of them? After calming down, though, I began to think about the ways in which this statement could be useful. If not as a requirement, then at least as an aspiration. In modern English, the word saint is tossed around to mean someone who's really good. A stranger stops to fix a flat tire by the side of the road, and we say something like, "Oh, you're a saint." For many of us, though, the word brings up images from the Christian tradition, mostly the Roman Catholic end of it, of people with halos and peaceful expressions on their faces, often depicted in scenes of their painful and violent deaths. These include names like John and Paul, both of whom were murdered by their governments, Francis and Augustine, who each led lives of hedonism and reckless abandon before dramatic changes in heart and soul, Joan and George, who both were military saints, remembered for their bravery and nobility in battle. But the idea that the word saint points to, a spiritual figure so wise or courageous or devoted that they are worth trying to learn from and emulate, that idea is not unique to Christianity. It has parallels in the Jewish tzaddik and the Muslim wali, and in the Hindu world, there are actually several different titles that are sometimes translated into English as saint. In at least one case, all three of these groups overlap. Sarmad Kashani was an Armenian Jew who came to India in the 17th century. By some accounts, he converted to Islam. Others then say that he became a Hindu after that. It is hard to know for sure because in the religious poetry for which he is famous, Sarmad describes himself variously as a Jew, a Muslim, a Hindu, a Buddhist, and a non-believer. He was a holy man with a wild and stubborn reputation. Perhaps to explain himself, he once wrote, "There is no fault with a madman. The fault lies with you. Love hasn't maddened you yet." Today, his tomb is visited by pilgrims of many kinds, Muslims, Hindus, and Sikhs. And because Sarmad was a man who loved other men, activists from India's gay rights movement also sometimes number him among their own martyrs. Now, before I started studying religion professionally, the saint I was most familiar with was a fictional one. Isaac Edward Leibowitz is the titular figure in Walter Miller's classic science fiction novel, A Canticle for Leibowitz. St. Leibowitz was a Jewish engineer who survived a nuclear apocalypse and devoted his life to salvaging and protecting the knowledge of a decimated planet in the form of books. In the novel, he has long since died, having been killed on one of his book smuggling trips by other survivors who were pathologically afraid of the power of science and knowledge. But the memory of him, however mythologized, endures. A whole order of monks eventually devote themselves to continuing his work, rescuing science textbooks from abandoned warehouses and creating illuminated manuscripts out of circuit diagrams. All to preserve knowledge that they themselves lacked the context and understanding to make effective use from, until the coming of that day that they could not properly imagine, only hope towards. That day when others who were wiser in the ways of science might rekindle the understanding necessary to make use of what they could only protect and repeat. Although that story is a fictional one, it is a little like the very real quote from Victor Hugo about libraries. A library implies an act of faith which generations still in darkness hid sign in their night, in witness of the dawn. When I was in seminary, I had a job cleaning books in the rare book room, which housed one of the largest collections of exclusively Unitarian writings anywhere in the world. Please do not get too impressed. There's not a lot of competition. There were books of all shapes and sizes in at least 8 different languages, but some of the oldest books were the very smallest ones. They had to be made so little in the time that they were written because being caught with one of them could mean prison or execution. So they copied out on pages so small that they could be hidden in a sleeve or a stocking. A particular prize of that collection was one such small book by Michael Servetus. Original copies of his works are very rare, at least in part because when he was executed for heresy, the fire was kindled with every copy that could be found of anything that he had written. Servetus ranks among the entirely unofficial, completely uncanonized list of our own saints that we Unitarian Universalists invoke from time to time. Kotaku Wamura was not a saint by any formal designation that I am aware of. He was just the elected leader of his little village, and that gave him a certain responsibility to look after its well-being. But the origin of his determination to build that floodgate was not only the scientific reports he had read that made it clear a devastating tsunami was a future possibility. He had also witnessed one long before he was elected mayor, when Fudai was struck by a major tidal wave in 1933. He remembered how terrible the loss was. He never wanted to see it happen again. Our experience of life is a very particular form of knowledge. We can easily take too much from it and try to force our own sense of what is most important and necessary onto other people. Aware of the worst that can happen, we can become dominated by that fear. We can become defined by it, constricted to the point that it constrains us and our relationships with others and with the world. But we can also take from it a deep sense of purpose, the sense of what our lives up to this moment are calling out for us to do, the sense that lives and ways of living are worth preserving and defending, not because they are permanent and invulnerable, but because they are fragile and temporary and precious. That it is worth facing the worst in order to prepare for it. And if it comes, when it comes, that it is worth persisting and pressing on.
horses they are restless. I watch them from my windows, music with the breeze.
I've seen the branches sway,
The sun upon the ocean is building his grass. What wind is it that blows here? What changes come about?
I pray 'tis some good wind.
An angel breathing
And if the fall of water could form a fleeting word,
I'd run and ask the river what she may have,
in fairy tales they caution
that weather is a force, it's laden with intention. One may shift its course. What wind is it that blows here? What changes come about?
I pray 'tis some good wind.
An angel breathing out. I'm going to the garden to calm the horses down. My eyes are filled with water. I wave like a cloud.
My spirit is excited.
I'm nervous as the trees are when my soul is lifted. I turn and face the breeze. What wind is it that blows here? What changes come about?
I sense it is some good wind.
A good wind.
An angel, an angel, an angel, an angel. An angel breathing out.
I invite you now into this time of giving and receiving, where we give freely and generously to this offering which supports the ongoing work of this community and the work of our outreach offering recipient. This week's recipient is the Nehemiah Center for Urban Leadership Development, which cultivates character, leadership, and economic development within Dane County's African American community through culturally grounded programs. Their Justified Anger initiative works to eliminate racial disparities in the greater Madison area by developing relationships, solutions, and systems. There are multiple ways to share your gifts this morning. Baskets are now being passed here in the auditorium for cash or checks, or you can donate directly on our website, fusmadison.org. And you'll see on the screen our new text to give information. We thank you for your generosity and your faith in this life we create together.
Thank you so much for that beautiful music. Each week we gather, carrying in our hearts the joys and the losses of our days. We hold our own pain and celebration together with those of the ones we love. We share these here, knowing they are held gently in care and in support and in love. Sarah asks us to light a candle for her cousin, who began chemotherapy this past Friday. We offer our hopes for a healing of the body and a strengthening of the spirit. One of us asks that we light a candle for this happy news. It is a tremendous, tearful joy that Michael B.B. has been located, contacted, and confirmed by the Frank and Lorenz families as his birth family. Father was Richard Frank. Now he has the genuine joy of coming out all over again. Light a candle of gratitude to everyone who helped out in a precarious moment at yesterday's Autumn Fest, where a car needed to be pushed into the parking lot and someone helped to a wheelchair. It's great comfort for that person, and thank you, everyone who lent their work to it. We also light a candle for all those who feel isolated by grief, by chronic pain, by mental illness, and all others who are alone and lonely. To you we extend our compassionate hearts. And we light a candle for all of those joys and sorrows, hopes and dreams that remain unspoken in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts. I invite you now to turn with me both inward and outward as we enter together into an attitude of meditation and of prayer with these words from Mark Bellatini. I hear the polls are going to be open next Tuesday, all day. Good. I certainly intend to go to them. I certainly invite you to go to them and to vote too. But today I say the polls are not just open on Tuesdays. They are open every day, every hour, even here, even now. Right now, I am going to vote for the robin's egg sky, the vanilla clouds, the purple shadow spreading under the ginkgo tree. I'm going to vote for tulips and redbuds. I am going to vote for love that does not have to run in someone else's circles in order to be love. I'm going to vote the homeless into homes. I'm going to vote the uneducated into classrooms that teach them in the way they learn best, not the way that would be most convenient. I'm going to vote the sick into healing. I'm going to vote the lost into belonging. I'm going to vote right now for the right to dream of a world where the word politics does not stop me in my tracks, where the word honor still has a few good meanings left. I'm going to vote right now for the power of free people to actually be free, no matter who they are, no matter who has abandoned them, no matter who hates them. I am actually going to vote for love. I am going to vote for truthfulness as the norm, not the exception. I'm going to vote for a world that doesn't vote for killing, control, and swagger. I'm going to vote for you. I'm going to vote for me. Right now, right here. Silently, but for real. Blessed be, and amen.
And now I invite you to rise in body and or in spirit so we can sing together our closing hymn, number 114, in the hymnal or on your screen forward, Through the Ages.
When the candle dims, the wax almost spent, the light turns amber like a sunset. Still, it provides light. Still, it provides heat. Still, it can kindle new flame and pass its glow on and contribute a new illumination. When sunsets turn to new days, when seasons transform all, when the candle dims, all is not lost. Hope continues, uncertain and true, like candlelight, ready to spark again. All is not lost. Blessed be. Go in peace, and please be at rest for the postlude.
Amen.